Hello and welcome to another managerial special from the Unsport Podcast. I'm Craig Taylor. Yeah, next to me is Mr. Daniel Cody. And today we are talking about Scott Parker, appointed as the new head coach of AFC Bournemouth. He leaves Fulham by mutual consent and he is signed for Bournemouth on a 3-year deal. So it would look like he's been coming for a few weeks. Are you surprised that Scott Parker left Fulham?
Not really. I think it's more a mutual than Scott Parker leaving Fulham. I don't think he would have survived there much longer. We've talked a bit about Fulham off the pitch before, and I'm sure we will when we get to their replacement. But I'm not surprised he's left because I think it's a great opportunity to walk to another very good job before you're potentially pushed if you don't have the right backing and a great start to the season. So I think it's a bit of a loss to Fulham, but obviously we'll cover that in another episode. For Bournemouth, I think it's a good move for him. I think it suits him. Obviously, he was renowned, particularly in the Championship with Fulham, for playing a pretty suave and good and modern style of play. And that's what Bournemouth have generally liked to do, thinking Eddie Howe beforehand. I mean, the thing that grabbed my eye, to be honest, Craig, was the fact that it's not just Scott Parker joining, that they've basically overhauled the whole backroom team and brought in lots of new leads in their certain industries. So sort of a lead analyst, a knee performance coach, a new assistant coach, a goalkeeping coach. And for Bournemouth, who had had Eddie Howe before, who had been a stalwart, and then trying to replace him pretty calmly, I think, with Jason Tindall from within the club, and then Woodgate with the same back team members. This seems like, from Bournemouth, a real statement of intent that they're actually going to turn the club and properly transition after the Eddie Howe era.
We looked at that final game that Jonathan Woodgate had, the semi-final of the playoffs against Brentford, and that was pretty much an anti-Bournemouth performance from what we've seen for the last 5-6 years. So from that game, was you surprised how they played it?
A little bit. I mean, I think the thing that surprised me more about it was the fact that when Jonathan Woodgate took over, I think it's fair to say as a podcast, we were extremely sceptical. And
Charlie was.
Well, Charlie was. And I won't lie, I was pretty sceptical as well. And I think we all were to an extent. But they did do really well. And under Woodgate for most of the second half of the season, they outscored teams. They pushed forward. They counter-attacked teams. They looked threatening. They created chances. They scored goals. And then in the playoffs, I don't know whether just because of the threat of Brentford, they went back to this sort of tactical defensive mentality, which he did play a little bit at Middlesbrough in his first managerial job, and it didn't really work out. It certainly didn't suit the Bournemouth players, and in the end, it ended up costing them. Although, to be honest, if it hadn't been for a ridiculous goal conceded, we might well be talking about Bournemouth in the Premier League and Jonathan Woodgate as one of their greatest ever managers. So, these things are finely poised when it comes to the playoffs.
So let's get on to Scott Parker, what he's got to do for the next season. And I think the main thing we have to wait is keeping his best players, mainly Danjuma.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair statement. Obviously, they have got some quality players. They've got some international players that we're seeing even in the Euros in the last couple of weeks. But for Bournemouth, I think it's keeping hold of that attacking talent. You've talked about Danjuma. Obviously, Dominic Solanke at Championship level, whatever you think about him when he first came to Bournemouth, is a good player at Championship level. They've got lots of quality. They've got lots of experience. And they did score goals galore last season. I know particularly under Woodgate towards the end, but 73 goals in the league. They had the best goal difference outside the top three. And they've still got a pretty experienced Championship defence. So if he can add one or two defensively and maybe keep hold of those star attacking players, I really think Bournemouth could be a threat next year. It always comes down to the same as normal, doesn't it? Does the manager get time? Do they get to gel the squad? But actually, with Scott Parker, he could hit the ground running because it should be the squad that needs the least overhaul. They've still got a huge core of that Premier League squad from a year and a bit ago.
Would you say that obviously would he invest in a bit more youth players in? Do you think they're structurally good enough? Because Scott Parker did play a lot of youth players in his time for them.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, over the last few years, they had signed younger players generally. I mean, we saw Jack Stacey, who obviously came from our club, Luton Town, who's a fantastic young fullback. Lloyd Kelly on the other side pretty much meets the same criteria. And you've even got Chris Mepham now, 3 of the back 4. Mepham breaking into the Wales squad for the Euros too. So I think we will see a slightly younger squad. I mean, there's a lot of experienced players at Bournemouth. And while they're going to be invaluable off the pitch and in some cases on it, you can't have that many in the Championship. The games are going to come thick and fast. I mean, hopefully it's no effect, but we don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic next season, whether we'll have odd fixture cancellations. And we saw pile-ups that affected teams last year. Rotherham was the best example in the Championship, probably cost them their place. So I think we are going to see a few more younger players coming in. But I still think he's going to lean on experience more than perhaps he did at Fulham, just because of the players and the stalwarts he's got there.
Who do you think will be the key player for the next season?
If fit and if he stays at the club, David Brooks has all of the ability and potential to be the key man. Obviously, Danjuma is the obvious answer, but I want to try and find someone different. And to be fair, looking at the way he played in the Championship with Mitrovic, if he can get that out of Dominic Solanke, or if he can play to his strengths, I can see Solanke being the top scorer in the Championship. He's got a lot of potential and has struggled with confidence for a while. But you can't look past David Brooks. If he's fit, and more importantly for me, if he stays, which I think the fact he didn't play much in the Euros might help Bournemouth with that.
So let's get on to the next bit of, will he succeed? Will he do well? Will he have a good start? Will he have a slow start? Will he need to recruit? So do you think he'll have that fast start? Do you think because he knows the Championship quite well, took Fulham up from the playoffs season before last? So do you think he will start well?
I think he's got the best chance of the ones we've done from the Championship so far. I mean, even out of the three that went down in the Premier League last year, he did put up the best fight with Fulham, and they weren't necessarily the best squad of the three. I think if they can keep hold of their stars and don't have to have a big turnover at the club, I think they've got a great chance of doing really well. And I know Scott Parker hasn't ever got them to that position before, but given what I've said about the last two, and I think they might struggle a little bit in West Brom and Sheffield United, I'm actually going to be quite bold here, Craig. I think if he gets the start, he keeps hold of the key players and maybe adds one or two defensively, sort of thinking a sort of defensive sort of midfielder who might be able to break up the play a bit more alongside a Lerma, and then maybe one centre half alongside Mepham. I think Bournemouth are top two candidates next year. I just can't see, of the relegated sides from last year and those who are fighting for promotion this season, how many sides are in a better shape than Bournemouth in terms of quality of squad and in terms of quality of head coach now. I think Bournemouth have got one of the best chances. And if all goes to plan, if they keep hold of their squad, I'm going second place for Bournemouth. But I haven't decided who are champions yet.
No, nor have I. And you're going bold on second place. I think, I don't know. I don't know. I think people gave him a lot of credit last season for them. But I think at the end of the day, he failed. He did make a lot of signings and kept chopping and changing. I don't think they've done enough for me to actually survive a game where they made the same mistakes and they just didn't learn from it. If they held on against Arsenal, for example, they were leading from the whole game and then conceded in the 93rd minute. But the Bournemouth squad is very good. I thought they really underachieved last season. When you look back on it, they finished sixth in the end. So I think they've really underachieved. I think they're going to be in the playoffs again. I don't think top two. I'm probably going to say fourth. I don't know. I haven't even picked my top six yet, but I'm going to probably say fourth. It will by the time we get to the Championship predictions later on in the summer, it'll probably change again. So I think playoffs will be fine for Scott Parker. That's the absolute minimum for playoffs.
Yeah, I think to be fair, just to go in quickly, I think you're right. It's harder to predict now because Bournemouth haven't brought anyone in yet. Something we've mentioned about other clubs, and it's so hard to predict if you're not going to get a full pre-season. And for a lot of these bigger clubs in the Championship, they're only going to get 3 or 4 weeks after the Euros and after players have had their summer breaks. So we aren't going to look quite as stupid this year if we get it wrong. But I think we're in agreement. Bournemouth have got a top 6 side, and that has to be the minimum.
Absolutely. But one final question for me is, guys, do you think Scott Parker will last for 3 years?
Again, I say it the same as I did for the last question. I think he's got the best chance of some of the others. If he hits the ground running, then he'll be given time. I guess it depends. If they get promoted, as I think they might, then if you have a poor start in the Premier League, everyone panics because it's all about the money. So potentially not. But as long as he gets in the top 6, he'll definitely be there next season. And I think he's got a pretty good chance of seeing out the 3 years. Because if Bournemouth go up again with a few additions, they've got a squad with a lot of young players that may be able to compete. So, sure, I'll stick my neck on the line for the first time and say he's going to get to at least the 3rd year.
I'll be honest. I have to agree, to be honest. Bournemouth do like to give, before anyhow, they do like to give their managers a chance. I think they did panic with Jason Tindall. We all said at the time it was a bad move for them to go for Jason Tindall, and Jonathan Woodgate was just there to fill in the gap to the end of the season. So I think Scotty Parker will last at least 3 years. I have to agree with you on that one. But let us know what you think on Scotty Parker's appointment to AFC Bournemouth. Do you agree with us or disagree with us? Do you think they'll make the top 6 at least? Let us know in the comment section down there. And while you're down there, give this video a like, subscribe to the Honest Football Podcast, and you can follow us on Twitter at Honest Football Free. And we'll see you next time.